Welcome to the Dr. Donna podcast, here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Innovative, evidence-based recovery that helps to identify intergenerational trauma, allowing for freedom and embracement of the healing process. Today, episode 117, Revisiting Emotional Immaturity, Part 1. And now your host, Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee.
I'm Dr. Donna. Welcome to my podcast. So last week I ended my show with telling you that it had been requested of me that I should, that it would be good for me to review some of the older material that I talked about in the beginning. And that has to do with emotional immaturity. Emotional immaturity is fine if you are young. If you are, say, under the age of 25 to 27 and you're emotionally immature, it's because you are young. That emotional immaturity is a condition that runs rampant among the young, and you're not going to fix it. If you're young, you're just emotionally immature. You haven't gotten there yet. We know now, because of all of the research, the empirical evidence coming out, that people don't really mature until they're between, say, age 25 and 27. And so if you are a person who gets accused of being emotionally immature and you're under the age of 25, you can also think to yourself, well, give me a little time. I'll grow up. And you could also say in that moment, what happened here? And you can learn from that. That's fine. So the problem is that when adults over the age of 25, people who are over the age of 25 are acting like children, because that's what emotional immaturity is a problem, is that when adults act like children. Now, when adults curl up in the corner and cry because someone confronted them about, say, their racism, that would be acting like a real young child, say, under the age of 5 or 6. If they come back at you and start defending themselves and being angry about it, and they're acting, like a teenager, because that's what teenagers do. So emotional immaturity is really a problem for adults. And I want to talk about how that happens and what it looks like. I've talked about this before, but, I keep getting requests to talk about it again because it takes time. People have to hear this sometimes more than once in order to learn it. Why is that? Because if you are an adult, it's hard to learn new things. That's all. It's hard to learn new things. And when you're a child, say, you might hear somebody say, it would be better if you would, make your J's look like this. It's probably a lot easier because your brain is still forming. So it doesn't have all those neural canals and all the connections in your brain between, neurons firing and receiving and all that. It's just becoming mature. Okay. It's like your body. Your body isn't fully mature until you're in your early 20s for the most part. For girls, they mature faster physically than boys. They tend to, reach milestones in their physical growth, in their psychological growth, and their emotional growth a little bit ahead of boys. But by the time everybody's about 25 or 27, it's done. Okay? You're done. You're cooked. And so I want to talk about what happens. Emotional immaturity is always caused by childhood trauma. Everybody that still acts like a child has had emotional trauma in their life. They've had childhood trauma in their lives that hasn't been dealt with, and sometimes it has been dealt with. Okay. I know of a situation that happened quite a while back where a woman who had been doing work all of her life and was very much not impacted by her childhood trauma that she had because of all the work she had done. And so she acted like an adult like I'd say 80 to 90% of the time, had emotional responses that were adult 80 to 90% of the time. But the thing is that if you had childhood trauma, it's never completely healed. All right. It's like you can, it's like a physical trauma. If you were in a car accident when you were a child and you cut your face open, say one of your cheeks got cut open, and it was even, sewn together by a really good plastic surgeon, I can guarantee you there will be some kind of scar that will be on your face for the rest of your life. Even if you have plastic surgery many times, there's still going to be some kind of scar. All right? And that's true for emotional trauma and psychological trauma. And anyway, this woman had been working on her emotional and psychological trauma for pretty much her whole life. I mean, it's an ongoing thing. Once you make a commitment to get better, it doesn't like, oh, I'm all better now, I guess I'll be fine. No, you still have to deal with yourself. All right. So she'd been doing all this work. And one day, somebody she didn't even know a grown man was throwing a fit. And she happened to walk into a situation where this grown man was throwing a big fit, breaking stuff, throwing stuff. And she, because she did not see this coming, started to act the same way that she used to when she was a young child and there was violence in the family by the father. She started doing the same exact things that she did when she was 3 years old in that violent household. She started behaving the same way. And what she did was she just kind of crawled over to a corner and started to rock. And this is a fully adult woman, like I said, doing work her whole life. And there she was, looking like a wounded child. Okay? So I want to impress upon you, the reason that I'm going over this again is because if you had childhood trauma, it's a wound, it's a scar, and it's important to identify it and recognize it. And how do you do that? You do that when you understand and recognize that I'm not acting like an adult here at all. I'm over in the corner rocking. Oh, it's like, well, for her, she knew, as soon as the guy was gone, she knew, wow, what am I doing here? And what's happened here? And so she was able to see that, oh man, this hasn't happened for a long, long time. And I know where it came from and what it's about. And I need to spend a little time healing again because, that scar was opened a little bit and I just need to do some healing. And so she did, she talked to me. She talked to a couple of other people that knew her and we listened and supported her in taking really good care of herself. And she'd be okay now, but it's about childhood trauma. All right. And, I went through what childhood trauma is, a long time ago, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit now. And that is when you are growing up in a family that is less than nurturing, or maybe a classroom that was less than nurturing. And what I mean by less than nurturing is that if you were a child in a situation, any situation, I don't care whether it was church, next door neighbor, your family, your classroom, I don't care where it was. If you were in a state of fear that you couldn't get out of, okay? So like if you were playing in the street and almost got hit by a car, that is traumatic. But chances are that was, a blip in time that you remember it because it was a big, big thing for you, that you didn't get hit by the car. So you were able to get away, but your whole system was in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, and you were able to get away and not get hit by the car. Is still traumatic. All right. So you might say, okay, that happened. And now when I see a car barreling towards me, or maybe a car of the same color, I have a little bit of a reaction, but it's easy to recognize, for most people. I'm talking about the kind that impairs your ability to mature is the kind of fear that you live in as a child where there is no getting away. You can't get away. It's happening. You can't take care of yourself because you're a child. Let's say the people, the adults that are in charge aren't doing what they need to do to make sure you're safe. You just live in fear. Because we know, because of empirical evidence, longitudinal studies, PET scans of the brain, that when this happens to a child, and they live in a state of fear in a situation that they can't get out of, their brain freezes up. And when you're a child, you are learning all of the time. Every minute that you are awake, you are learning something new. And when you learn something new, your brain is a flurry of activity. Okay? It's making neural canals. It's finding out if there's a neural canal that's already been established that it can jump into and sail on. Or does it need to make a new one? I mean, it is a flurry of activity. What happens when a child is living in a state of fear is that their brain stops developing in that moment. And it doesn't start again until they're in a situation where they're not afraid. So if they're afraid at home all the time, then maybe, it's like there will still be brain activity, but the learning, the emotional maturing will not continue. Let's say the child then goes to school where all the teachers love them, where the kids like them, where they feel safe and secure. Then there's all that activity, but it starts where it stopped. Okay? No, it starts where it would have been had it never stopped. So there's a gap in the learning. Okay? The child feels safe at school. The child feels fear at home. There's emotional freezing at home. They go to school. They feel safe and secure. And the emotional development picks up where it would have been. So they might look like they're little adults. They might look like, wow, I'm here now. So I'm going to be real good and I'm going to be a model student. Because I want to make sure this continues. Because, if you're a child and you're growing up in an environment that's less than nurturing, you think it's your fault. You think it's your fault. And so all of your experience with other adults kind of comes into a position, you come into a position where I need to be perfect in order for this not to happen at school, or in order for this not to happen at church, or in order for this not to happen at my friend's house. And so everyone sees you as this model child, right? At home, you're terrified. And so you create defense mechanisms as a child to deal with what is happening there. Okay? And some of those, you might have a lot of defense mechanisms. You can identify maybe what some of your trauma was by looking at the defense mechanisms that you use today. And I'm just going to go through these real quick. One is repression. You just don't have a memory of it. And why is that? Well, sometimes your brain doesn't know what it is that's happening. So you can't remember because you don't know what's going on. Okay. If I'm trying to have a conversation with somebody, say, who lives in a country that they don't speak English and I don't speak their language, we're going to have a very big conversation. I might have a foggy memory of that person, but I have no clue what was going on. All right. So, and that's because I don't know the language. So how can I remember what that person was saying to me if I don't know the language and no one's there to interpret? I'm not going to remember that. It's just not going to happen. Okay. So when I try and remember that, the only thing I might have is just the face. I might not even remember the situation. All right. So when you're a child, you don't have the breadth of common knowledge that you have as an adult just because you're an adult. Like if I'm an adult and I might know that, if I go to a foreign country, say I go to Russia, which I would not do right now, but let's just say I would go to Russia, then I would know that they speak Russian there and they might look like me. They might even dress like me. But if we try and have a conversation, it's not going to happen. And so I can prepare myself. If I'm a child and things are happening to me that I don't understand, but that makes me afraid, and let's say there's pain involved, and of course I'm going to feel like it's all my fault, then I'm a bundle of emotions that I have no clue about. So what will happen is that I will go through my adult life, and let's say somebody touches me wrong, just say somebody touches me in a way or says something to me in a way that would trigger that memory. Then I would think, what is that about? Have I lost my mind? Okay. One of the best examples I have of repression was, and I know I've mentioned this before because it stands out so much. I know I've used it before, but this, situation happened when I was a therapist a long time, like longer ago than most of you are at your age, like 50 years ago or something. Let's say that this person I was working with and had all the adult symptoms of sexual abuse as a child, but was very aware, very alert, had been doing a lot of her own work for a long time. And, was not troubled by it, wasn't in active addiction, just said, I know this happened to me, but I have no memory of it. And it troubles me because I can't seem to get past it. It just comes out of the blue. So she described what happened to her. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a very young reaction to, your sexuality. And so talked and talked, searched and searched, couldn't figure it out. Then one day when she did the work that she needed to do. With the work she did was based on, well, you have these adult symptoms, and so we're going to treat it, like it happened. Kind of like if you walk into your physician's office and say, here's a group of symptoms, your doctor might not know exactly what's going on, but says, well, we can still treat this as if it were this, like these symptoms. And maybe we'll find out sometime what it is. So we did. And then at the end, she said, when she was getting ready to leave and go off and do her own thing because she didn't need me anymore, she said, there was this one time that I remember a really weird thing happening to me as a child, but, it wasn't sexual abuse. I said, well, tell me about it. how she, when she was young, an elderly male relative of hers lived with her family. And she said it was really, everybody talked about how sweet he was all the time. And she said, I don't really like him very much, but he was pretty sweet and da-da-da. And how he would come into her room when she would go to bed and come up to her crib, because she was only like probably 2 or 3 years old, maybe younger. And she said it was really weird, though. He would come up to the crib and, those bars, those wooden bars that they have that they pull up so you won't fall out of bed or get out of bed. He would come up and he would put his nose through those bars and ask me to suck on his nose. And, would make her put that nose in her mouth. That's what he did. He put that nose in her mouth. He'd pull her face up to the bars and then he'd put his nose in her mouth. And as soon as she said it, she just kind of did the head slap thing, like, oh my gosh. And she did this head slap thing. She says, that wasn't his nose, was it? And I said, no, that is not a common practice. People don't do that. They don't go around putting their nose in people's mouths. Doesn't happen. And it's like she had this flood of emotion that came up and recognized that that's what it was. And so she stayed a little longer and did a little more work, but because she'd done so much work before and understood, that this was not a house where she felt safe, and she certainly didn't feel safe there, that she was able to finish that work. And as a result, why would you do this work? Why would you go back there and try and figure out what happened? Because it impacted her marriage. Okay, it impacted the sexual intimacy in her marriage. That's why. You don't say, oh, I have this great life and everything works and I don't have any big stuff that comes up, but out of the clear blue or otherwise, and I'm doing great. So I think I'll go find out if there's anything in my history that was abusive. So don't do that, okay? But if you have an impact in your adult life, then absolutely. Let's say even though you grew up in a family where there was a lot of violence, you decide, I am never going to be violent. I'm never going to do that. And so because this is one of the things that happens, is like you either repeat or you go to the opposite. So you go to the opposite and you absolutely do not do anything that would cause your child to look at you or be angry at you, look at you with anger or be angry at you for doing that. Okay? So let's say the child has chores and you're a child in that situation and you don't want to do those chores, but now you're the parent that grew up in a violent family. And so what do? You go do the chores for them. Because the last thing you want to do is get your child mad at you because you go into your wounded child and become incompetent. So that's one end of this spectrum. And if you grow up in that family, you are absolutely emotionally immature because you haven't learned how to deal with the rules. And so when the rules go against what you think you should deserve or that you deserve, you get all whacked out and go crazy about it. But if you grow up in a violent family, you could also become violent yourself. It's like it's a very difficult thing to do by yourself to become moderate in your behavior and even in your emotions if you grow up in a situation that you had too much fear because your brain didn't develop. That part of your brain that controls your emotions and your frontal lobe that controls what you say and do, they don't talk to each other very well. And so if something happens to you and you feel all, like somebody did something to you, and it usually has to do with I'm entitled and you're not doing what I think you should do, then I'm going to go into a rage. If I didn't, I'm either going to go into a rage and rage at you because you didn't do what I think I'm entitled for you to do, or you crawl into a hole and hope it goes away. That's not emotional maturity. Emotional maturity starts with self-awareness. And I am going to continue to talk about this because I just got through repression. And I know I kind of talk about all these things, but it all works together. And so I'm going to challenge you to look at your own behavior as an adult and say, do I act like a grown-up? And if you don't know, that's also a clue. Because people that grow up in families that are nurturing and they have nurturing adults in their lives, they don't wonder what moderation is. They know what moderation is. They live it. Okay. That's the challenge.
Thank you for listening to the Dr. Donna podcast here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Dr. Donna podcast is copyright 2023 Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.
Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The SoulWorks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. SoulWorks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the SoulWorks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.